Now, the federal government plays its hand against internet gambling. Ray Suarez has our story.
An estimated 8 million Americans made wagers online last year while playing poker, blackjack, or betting on their favorite sports team from the comfort of their homes and dorm rooms. It was as simple as point and click. Log on to a gambling site, most are based outside the U.S. You would then set up an account using a third-party company to manage the funds. Add credit card information, and within minutes, the gambling begins. At a virtual poker table, in real time, spending and losing, and sometimes winning, real money. The pastime may be over for many gamblers since the president signed the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act on Friday, a piece of legislation Congress quietly attached to a bill on port security. The act prohibits Americans from using electronic funds transfers, credit cards, and checks in placing bets with gambling sites worldwide. The bill holds banks and credit companies responsible for enforcement of the law. Several foreign online gambling businesses gave up their U.S. operations after the bill passed. Estimates put the value of the American online gaming market around $12 billion in 2005.
Some analysis now on the impact of these changes from two people familiar with the industry. Keith White is the executive director of the National Council on Problem Gambling, and Lawrence Walters is an attorney who represents a number of online gambling companies. And Lawrence Walter, if you boot up today and you go to your internet browser and seek out a gambling site because you want to play a few hands, what's different today from last week?
You know, from the average bettor's perspective, there's not going to be much different other than the fact that some of the larger and better-known sites may no longer be accepting bets from U.S. citizens. But your intro piece indicated that Americans are now going to be prohibited from betting online. That's not really the case. The bill has no impact on the individual player's activity. The bill is centered on restricting certain financial transactions, requiring that banks identify and block transactions going through their servers and their systems, and requiring that the actual sites, the internet gambling sites, stop and block these transactions. A lot of those are overseas, so the efficiency of that law is going to be in question. But as far as the bettor, they can pop on the internet and they can get on one of many different online sports betting or casino sites and still find a way to get the money to the right people to place the bet.
So one of the chief Senate proponents of this bill, the Majority Leader Bill Frist, when he said, "For me as Majority Leader, the bottom line is simple. Internet gambling is illegal." He wasn't right?
Not at that time, certainly. The Wire Act, which is the law that's most commonly identified as the law prohibiting internet gambling, only restricted the operation of a sports betting website, arguably. It didn't have any impact on online casino games or online poker, which are frankly the most popular now on the internet. It was restricted only to sports betting. A few states have prohibited internet gambling, and the federal government seems to take kind of a broad brush approach and proclaim that all internet gambling was illegal, when in fact the law had only been made applicable to sports betting. Now that this new act has been passed, the situation is even more confused because the law here seems to refer back to existing law. Whatever was prohibited before is prohibited now, plus it restricts certain financial transactions. So this is one that the courts, I think, are going to have a field day with, and we won't really know what it does until some court takes it apart and tries to interpret it.
Keith White, do you agree with Lawrence Walters that for gamblers or prospective gamblers going online today, the field really hasn't changed very much? They aren't doing anything that's illegal?
I think for casual gamblers, this bill does create some more barriers. But for both addicted gamblers and those that are really serious about it, they'll find a way, as Lawrence says. I think the best way to sum up this bill is that it makes illegal what is illegal, and it legalizes what is legal. So in other words, this bill has a carve-out for any type of internet gambling that is regulated by a state. It contains a specific carve-out for the racing industry to continue to offer online gambling. So really, the prohibition of this bill It's illegal to gamble on the internet in states where it is illegal to gamble on the internet. And in states where it is legal or that might want to legalize it, it's perfectly allowable.
What about the restrictions on banks and credit card companies? Does it make it more difficult to have chips on your end of the table, whether you're playing roulette or blackjack or poker?
Absolutely, because the bill is interesting. It doesn't make gambling on the internet illegal. It makes funding your wager on the internet illegal. So the transaction is the financial transaction is what is criminalized here, not necessarily the state of play. But I assume, and as Lawrence says, that people will find a way to develop offshore accounts. If this was just gambling, or even just gambling pornography, that'd be one thing. But in essence, this bill is saying to Americans, you can buy anything you want on the internet except gambling, and it's calling on the banks to try and enforce that. Now, segregating out a gambling transaction from a non-gambling transaction, especially if that transaction has gone through a third-party website, somebody overseas, I think is going to be very difficult.
Lawrence Walters, what's an e-wallet?
And that's what your guest was referring to. The e-wallets are essentially an electronic placeholder for money to be used on the internet. Something like NetTeller will operate by setting up an account that you can put money in, electronic money, and then use that money for a variety of services or products to be used by any other merchant that accepts that money. So what I can do is I can set up one of these accounts, I can fund it, and then I can use that money to gamble online. Now, what this legislation does is it says, well, NetTeller and you e-wallets, you have to somehow identify what this money is going to be used for once the consumer puts the money in the e-wallet. I don't know how they're going to possibly do that, because I can make the decision a split second before I transfer the funds to an internet website, and there's no way that an e-wallet provider is going to know what I'm going to do with that money ahead of time.
So this law doesn't make it illegal for a credit card company or a bank cashing a check to put money in an e-wallet, this placeholder for money.
Only if the service provider knows that the purpose of the funds is going to be internet gambling, and that's going to be fairly difficult to show.
Keith White, is part of the problem the fact that the web is the World Wide Web, and when you're doing things there, you're not in any particular place? I mean, if you put money in an e-wallet so you can gamble on a site that's in the Caribbean island of Antigua, where is the money? Where does it exist?
Yeah, and it further raises the question that we think about gambling in these 18th century terms, these 18th century boxes, that not only is, gambling legal in one state and not another, but the different forms are legal in different states. And we've placed a premium on that. Casinos are legal in Nevada, but not in Utah. But the internet makes a mockery of these distinctions in law. It makes a mockery of the way we try and keep gambling in these boxes and think about them in these comfortable terms. The internet has allowed us to do gambling anywhere, anytime, on any form. And frankly, our 18th century views and laws of gambling are really going to need to catch up with the 21st century ways of communication. So, yeah, to your point, it's very hard to determine legally or the policy matter where your gamble is taking place. If it takes place in the United States, if it takes place on a server in Bermuda, or if it takes place in Antigua, and whose law should apply.
Well, you come from an organization on problem gambling, studying problem gambling. Does this new set of hurdles at least make it harder for addicted gamblers to satisfy their compulsion, their desire for game?
We certainly think the law does no harm. It's not going to enable it to make internet gambling easier. But really, if you're going to try and help somebody with a gambling problem, as many of the backers of this legislation say, making it harder for them is not the solution. It's really, this is a health issue, and we need funds for prevention education. It's notable that there's not a single cent appropriated in this bill for prevention, for education, for treatment, or for research. So this is it's a way of trying to address a very serious health problem on the cheap, quite frankly. And I don't know how this bill would really help someone with a gambling problem.
Lawrence Walters, very quickly before we go, you've both been talking about how this won't block a lot of people who really want to gamble, yet as soon as the bill passed, a lot of businesses pulled up stakes in the United States. Why'd they do that then?
Well, and that's a very interesting point. And to your most recent point, the bill, I think, will do some harm for problem gamblers because the large companies that were in this space before, the publicly listed entities that respect American law and have chosen to get out of the field, donated large sums to the problem gambling effort. And now those industry players are going to be replaced with smaller, less regulated players and providers that don't donate those kinds of funds, don't have the money to do so. And, prohibition has never worked to address any kind of compulsion or addiction, and it isn't going to work here. In fact, it's going to reduce the amount of money that's available for problem gambling programs. So
Lawrence Walters, I'm going to have to stop it there. Thanks a lot for joining us, gentlemen, both.
Thank you.
My pleasure.